Well, I do appreciate very much everybody making an effort, and I understand we might have maybe upwards of 500 on the telephone calling in, and particularly on such short notice. I think this just went out sometime late yesterday afternoon, but obviously a few things been going on over the past week, and I'm not going to go over all of that. I think between the last Tuesday's meeting and the videos and the town halls that we've had, you never can say it enough. But I do want to take just a few minutes and tee up a couple of things and chat about it, and I'll introduce Jeff and make a few comments. And I know Jeff will have a few things he wants to say as well. But, maybe the biggest question I've gotten over the past week and a half is why would TSIS do this? What's in it for TSIS? Why would TSIS do this? Position of strength, doing well. And I thought I'd kind of revisit that a little bit, if you will, and talk about that. And I think there are many, many reasons why TSIS would consider what we've done. In no particular order, but I think the best place to start is probably Jeff and his management team. I've known Jeff for over 20 years. They run an exceptionally great company. I made this comment on the call last Tuesday that we have this compelling opportunity to create a Peach State powerhouse. Of course, Global's in Atlanta, we're here in Columbus. They were founded in Atlanta, we were founded here. It's just a compelling story. And I think given the opportunity to work, and Jeff will introduce his team, but given the opportunity to work with such a great, experienced management team like Jeff and his team is probably one of the best places to start. We've talked a lot about in our management meetings and leadership meetings about scale. And I've had a few people say, well, it's not like we were some little startup, we're a $17, $18 billion company. And that's accurate. And Global was, 21 plus billion when we signed our deal last Monday. And that's great. So, okay, you got a $44 billion company. And that is big. I know everything's relative. But when you look around in the market today and think about scale, and all of you have seen, what's going on with FIS buying WorldPay and Fiserv buying FDC, those two companies alone will be somewhere north of $80 billion in market cap. So when we close our deal, hopefully we'll be a lot bigger than we are today at the numbers, right? But call it 45 plus billion. So it's all relative. And scale is extremely important. And I know you've all heard me say many times that scale for scale's sake to us is not what drives us. We wanted to be bigger and more relevant where we play. And we play in issuing processing, we play in consumer solutions, and of course, for about 10 years, we played in merchant acquiring. And that's where we want to play. So when you think about, TSIS and Global coming together, that's exactly what we get. We get that massive scale. We get to grow where we play. No more, no less. We don't have any interest in being in mortgage processing, installment loan processing, treasury management services. That's not how Jeff or I see the future of what we do. And so it became really compelling. I think another reason, and we've talked about this a lot, all of you should know our vision. I used to challenge you on those great 8 words, but to be the leading global payments solutions provider. And so when you think about putting this combination together, again, this combo goes a heck of a long way to checking that box, to be the leading global payment solutions provider. And as all of you probably know, at least the merchant people know, for the last 2 years, we've had a very aggressive, aspirational goal of becoming the number 1 SMB merchant player in the United States. And that is a really aspirational goal from where we were. Again, hooking up with Global and this partnership absolutely checks that box as well. We will be the dominant number 1 SMB player in all of the United States. I think another reason, back to the great partnership with Jeff and his team, is the way we put this thing together, and we build it, and we'll continue to build it as a merger of equals. And I'll spend a little bit of time on that if needed. Maybe there'll be a question of it. But when you think about the ownership that our shareholders will have, is 48%. We're global at 52%. The board of directors are going to be split down the middle. Paul Todd, as we've indicated, is going to be CFO of this combined company, and so forth and so on. It truly is co-location, headquarters. It truly is a partnership and merger of equals. And maybe two other quick things. So when you think about their merchant business, which is like 4 times bigger than our merchant business, the companies are almost identical in every aspect. Revenue, EBITDA, free cash flow, there's hardly a nickel difference in the size of the companies in those metrics. So when you think about what we've also looked at for the past few years in our merchant business, as you know, in our issuing business, we're all over the globe. But in our merchant business, we're only in the United States. And we've talked a lot about how do we find the right path to the sea? How do we get out of the United States and grow our merchant business like we have been so successful growing our issuing business? Well, and I'll let Jeff get into his details, but this absolutely checks that box. They're in like 32 countries of in merchant acquiring, $800 or $900 million of revenue. We have zero. And one more last point, and I'll move on, is we've also talked for the past few years about should we own software and thinking about that in the merchant category beyond just being, partners with ISVs and that kind of thing. And Jeff and his team have made that pivot. I guess it started with Heartland, and they've been very aggressive in 2 or 3 or 4 acquisitions since then. And I think they've got $800 or $900 million of what they call owned software. Again, we have zero on the merchant side. So I think all of those reasons, and there are others, but that's kind of the Reader's Digest version of why we sat down and said it just makes sense. So I'll stop there. I did mention that I've known Jeff for about, well, somebody corrected me this morning, it's 23 years. I've been saying roughly 20, going back to 1996. So we go back, we have a long history. I'll let Jeff talk about his background and all of that, but we're delighted to have Jeff and most of his management team here today, particularly Cameron and Jeff, because they flew in from Mexico this morning, and that takes a commitment, as we all know, to keep that commitment that we set today for lunch and to come in and have a town hall. So we'll have some questions at the end. We'll be glad to take some from the audience as well. But let me turn it over to you, Jeff. And Jeff Sloan, CEO of Global Payments.
You guys hear me okay?
You may not be on. Yeah. I thought you ran a technology company.
I've never actually been to a technology company where the technology works. When you actually lead on. Have you ever seen that happen with conference calls and video? Right? It's the Steve Jobs thing in Apple. You don't want to get up and demo the new Apple and the thing doesn't work. But thank you, Troy, for what you said. And it's really a privilege and an honor to be here with everybody today at TSYS. I really wanted to do 2 things this afternoon. The first thing I wanted to do is give you a little bit more background on Global Payments. And Troy, I think, did an outstanding job describing why this partnership makes so much sense. But let me give you a little bit of detail on Global Payments in case you don't already know, and I think that helps inform some of the things that Troy just said. The second thing I want to mention is the importance of culture to your business at TSYS, to our business at Global Payments, and that's something that we spend a lot of time on. I think the companies are very similar, but I think it's important for you to hear how important it is to both of us and to TSYS and Global Payments to combine the best of the strengths, really, of our 2 cultures. But let me start first with some of the facts. I think Troy really touched on this a bit too. So today, Global Payments and TSYS are really about the same size. Some facts you may not know. We are at Global Payments prior to the TSYS partnership. We're in 32 countries, as Troy said. We actually do business in about 60. So very similar to TSYS. Our home is here in Georgia. Our home is here in the United States, which is about 70% of our revenue, almost identical, really, to TSYS. but we do about $1 billion of revenue today at Global Payments outside the United States. Very similar to TSYS in Europe, where Galen and team spends a lot of time. I'm going to come back to that because I think it really ties into how important the card issuing business is to what we do and where additional opportunities for consumer solutions will be. But I also want to say that we are physically present in 13 countries in Asia. So of course, TSYS has a fantastic partnership with China UnionPay and CUP Data in Asia. We too have a very large, at Global Payments, a very large business across Greater China, which I would say is mainland China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Macau. But we're also in 8 or 9 other geographies in Asia Pacific, which I think is a fantastic opportunity for the issuing business and for the consumer solutions business. So while we look a lot alike with TSYS and Global Payments in terms of the markets that we're in, we have slightly different areas of emphasis, us being Global Payments being in Asia Pacific, TSYS being in North America, South America, and Europe, and together I think that's very complementary. Let me also give you a few other statistics which I think are interesting. On a combined basis, to Troy's point about scale, our combined partner companies will do about 50 billion transactions a year. That's a really big number. When Troy spoke last week on the call, Troy, I think you actually had done the math. I can't remember it offhand, but it was, I'll say it's something like it. Was it 30 million a day? Whatever the math was, that you get to 50 billion a year, whatever that math is per day. So really, there is an element of the financial technology universe that TSYS and Global Payments won't be touching on a given day. Now, what does that really mean in the real world? What that means is every time you go to a gas station, every time you use your card, every time you buy something online, not just here in the United States, but really around the globe, in every market that really matters from a size point of view, TSYS, Global Payments are doing the same thing together in capturing all that consumer spend and all that share. So really a terrific combination from that point of view. A little bit more detail, and Troy alluded to our focus together on small to mid-sized merchants. On a combined basis, when you look at Cayenne, when you look at TransFirst, and you look at Global Payments, which has similar businesses in OpenEdge and in Heartland, on a combined basis, we'll do, and I always say this, CFOs can't really listen when so Paul and Cameron aren't really allowed to listen when I give numbers because I like to round up. And CFOs just round things. I mean, Dorinda's probably in the same boat and round down. But I would say on a combined basis, our integrated payments businesses, Cayenne and OpenEdge, will be about $1 billion of revenue. I rounded up. It's probably more like 900, but $1 billion sounds really good. So $1 billion of revenue. That's why I said it that way. On a combined basis, TSYS's e-commerce businesses, primarily here in the United States, and Global Payments e-commerce and omnichannel businesses will do worldwide about $1 billion of revenue. Those two businesses alone, our integrated businesses, our e-commerce and omnichannel businesses, will be $2 billion of revenue and among the largest businesses in the world doing what we do and based all right here in Georgia. Now, of course, we have a lot of offices around the world, and we're very cognizant of the diversity of our people and our employees, which I'll come back to. But we're very proud, as you can see on the slide, very proud that we're both headquartered right here in Georgia, and really about 100 miles away between Atlanta and Columbus. And as we said at the time of the announcement, it's incredibly important for us to keep our headquarters in Columbus as well as in Atlanta. And that's something was very important to the two of us. That's where our people are, where they live and work. That's what's important to the combined companies, and we have no intention of changing any of those things. And I think that's unique, really, to this kind of a partnership between TSYS and Global Payments. The other thing I wanted to comment on, because I do want to leave time for questions, is the importance of culture. As you see around the building at TSYS, and Troy and I spent a lot of time on this when we've been discussing a partnership over the last few months, people-centered payments, the way TSYS approaches its business, and the way TSYS approaches its colleagues is very similar to how Global Payments thinks about its businesses and its colleagues. I'll give you an example. At Global Payments, one of the things that we like to say is that the most important thing in our business around the world is our people. the quality of our people, attracting our people, motivating our people, retaining our people, promoting our people, giving our folks opportunities around the world to do what they want to do. Doesn't matter if it's a technology company or a financial services company or anything else. The most important thing in our company today is you. It's the people who are doing all the hard work every single day. And I think we share a common view that we wouldn't be anywhere in any of our businesses around the world without your help and without the quality of our people around the world. So we're very, very grateful for what you do for us every single day, and we thank you in advance for all the hard work that you've done and what you're going to do for us going forward. That's kind of point number one. Point number two, when we talked about the quality of the financial institution and the card issuer partnerships that TSYS has, and Paul Todd was with us on the road last week with investors in New York and Boston. It's a partnership. So when we shake someone's hand and we tell them, this is how we think about conducting our business, we don't need to look at a contract. Our word is our bond. What we tell people is what we're prepared to do. And I think TSYS and Global Payments approach their businesses very similarly. So when we tell our partners, our bank partners around the world, listen, it's important that we be investment grade, that's exactly what we're going to do. It doesn't matter if it's written down somewhere or not. So at the end of the day, treating others the way we want to be treated, handling things the right way, the first time and every time, is incredibly important to both of our businesses. And raising your hand when you don't see that happen is also very important, I think, to both of our businesses. So Troy and I had a lot of conversations over the last number of months about the importance of culture, the quality of our employees, what this partnership would do in terms of bringing more opportunities and more investments to what the combined company can do for our people is incredibly important to the success of our combined businesses. And you don't often hear that in transactions like this, but that's what I think is so distinctive about the partnership that we agreed to in the last week. And with that, Troy, I'd be happy to take, I'm sure both of us would be happy to take any questions that you all have. Sure. There's 4 folks with us here today from Global Payments in the front row. Cameron Brady, our CFO. Guido Sacchi, our Chief Technology Officer. David Green, our General Counsel. And Josh Whipple, Head of Strategy and Corporate Development for Global Payments.
Good job. I thought we did have some questions texted in earlier today, and Tony may have some of those. And again, we can intersperse them with questions from the audience as well. So, Tony, take it away.
All right, well, we'll start with the first question. And Jeff, this one is for you. And it is, what is the work culture like at Global Payments? Is it similar to TSYS? Our people-centered, performance-driven culture. I think you've just talked some about that. Can you maybe give another example or?
Well, I saw that question coming, which is why I answered in advance. But no, seriously, listen, what I would say is I think the cultures are incredibly similar between the two companies. So our perspective on the right way to manage a business is you're not successful unless those folks who are working for you are more successful than you are. And it's your responsibility to help your teammates. Almost nothing gets done at Global Payments, and I'm sure this is true at TSYS too. Nothing gets done at Global Payments that's done by one individual. It's always part of a team, and that includes me and Cameron and everybody in the front row, all the way down to somebody who just started the company just the other day. And I'm sure TSYS feels similarly. It's our responsibility to provide for their betterment, to make sure they're getting the training and support that they need. We've made a very big initiative over the last number of years at Global Payments, and I know so has TSYS, in inclusion and diversity. It's very important to our business, and it's important for a number of reasons. First of all, it's just the right thing to do. Treating other people the way you want to be treated is just the right way to go about life. The way I think about our business is that we're fortunate to be where we are. People have choices in life. They don't need to work for us or with us, and we want people to raise their hands and say, I want to work with you. I want to work at a company like that. And that's particularly true as we go forward in a new technology environment where the quality of what we're selling is the quality of our people. So treating others the way they deserve and the way they want to be treated is incredibly important. We at Global Payments have rolled out a number of initiatives. I know TSYS has two around women's networks, around Pride. We're sitting here in Pride Month around Pride efforts. Most recently, we're very proud of our track record in doing the right thing. That doesn't mean that we can't be a lot better in what we do, and we need to be a lot better in what we do. One of the conversations Troy and I had is, what does the company look like after the combination between the two? And of course, hasn't finished yet, but sitting here today, what do we think the company looks like at the board level, at the senior executive level? How diverse is it? I hope that what you'll see, and it's not quite finished yet, but I hope what you'll see is, I expect us to have one of the most diverse boards of directors of any public company in the world, the very first day. So it's not just something that we like to talk about, it's actually something that we're doing, and it's something that we're living and breathing. And we don't just do this because we're selfless. We do this because if you want the very best people, you have to cast the widest net, and you have to promote and represent and enhance the opportunities for everybody, or you're not going to get the very best people. So in addition to being the right thing to do, I absolutely believe it's the best thing to do as it relates to what the company should look like.
Why don't you mention I forget the name of it, but it's your Give Back Day, your worldwide
Days of service, yeah.
Day of Service.
So this is something, in all fairness, I plagiarized this from someone else. This wasn't just my idea. I think I told Troy this story. So when I was working in banking many years ago, we had something similar to this. So what we do at Global Payments is twice a year, we have what we call our Day of Service, which is everyone at the company. Now, mind you, this is in 32 countries, in 8 different primary languages, and I'm sure TSYS is very similar to this. Twice a year, usually in April and October, every office in the world picks a volunteer service that they want to do. So, for example, here in Atlanta, most recently, it was volunteering at Susan Komen. It was building a house in Habitat for Humanity. In our Hong Kong office, it was cleaning up a public park and repairing a beach. We've also done Ronald McDonald House and everything else. And what it means is all of us go out and volunteer. So it's not financial in nature. We dedicate a day twice a year during the work week, all together at the same time, where we give back to the communities in which we live and work. And while our people give back all the time, and you may say, gee, how distinctive is that? Our folks always volunteer. What's distinctive is that we're all doing it together on the same day around the world. So what I said to Troy was, when I'm driving into the office in Atlanta in the morning, the folks in our Asian offices are finishing the day, because they're 12 hours ahead in general. They're finishing their volunteer day at that time. And at the time, our colleagues in Europe are kind of halfway through at lunch hour. But we're all giving back at the same time. Just in the most recent day in April of 2019, I think in that one day, our folks gave back over 9,000 hours, one day, of volunteer investment back in the communities in which we live and work. So it's a business. I get that it's a business, but I think it's also incredibly important to us that our culture be at the front of what we're trying to communicate. And I think, and I know actually from conversations with our folks, that it's incredibly important to our people around the globe.
Great, thank you.
All right, we do have a number of questions that were texted in, but we also want to take some in the room. So if you do have a question, if you will do me a favor and raise your hand, and I have Dawn down here and Jerry is up there who can run a microphone to you. We want to make sure you have a mic so that the folks on the phone listening in will be able to hear the questions as well. So we'll move on to the second question, and this is for you, Troy. How does this merger benefit TSYS employees?
Well, I think I've touched on some of that already, and even Jeff a minute ago, talked about opportunities and investments. So again, when you think about putting these two companies together with $3.5 billion of EBITDA and $2.5 billion of free cash flow, it gives you these opportunities to make these investments that otherwise, perhaps standalone, it would be much more difficult to do. So it clearly gives these people opportunities. I mentioned in the merchant business, for instance, they're 4 times bigger than we are in merchant acquiring. They're in 32 countries outside the United States. We're in 0 in merchant acquiring. So it just, again, gives opportunities. Jeff and I have spent a lot of time talking about where we see some opportunities with our FIs, particularly our global FIs, to be able to create bank partnerships, referral relationships, maybe joint ventures, because we have so many good FIs. And again, that just creates more opportunities. So we're convinced, look, there's 24,000 people in this new combined company. That's going to create a lot of opportunities for a lot of people.
Okay. Any questions in the room now? Okay. Well, we'll move along. This one is again for you, Troy. Why is Issuer Solutions operating under TSYS instead of Global Payments?
Do you want it to be global payment? Well, I'm not sure about that one. Again, Jeff and I have spent a lot of time talking about a lot of stuff the past few months, and maybe a couple of thoughts. One, obviously we all know how we got started in the business as a third-party issuer, processor, whatever you want to call it, Issuer Solutions today, under the brand of Total System Services, Inc., which kind of like Federal Express eventually became TSYS, like FedEx. So that's how we go to market. And granted, some might say, well, don't you go to market in merchant today under TSYS Merchant Solutions? Well, we do. But again, that's been a 10-year business. So it doesn't have the name recognition, or at least the connectivity, if you will, to merchant like issuing. And obviously, as you all know, issuing is whatever, 44, 45% of our revenue today at this company. So quickly, Jeff and I agreed that, keeping the name TSYS in a town that's got 5,000 employees in this town, it is how we go to market with our issuing business, and that's the brand we should keep. And he was quick to point out, too, just hit me, that when they acquired Heartland, they still go to market, they kept the Heartland brand. I mean, the Heartland brand was bigger in SMB world, I guess, than global back, 3, 4 years ago. And so they still have that brand as well. So it's, I guess, in some ways, in a much smaller scale, we kept NetSpan brand. We go to market on our GPR and DDA business, Consumer Solutions, under the NetSpan brand. So it just seemed to make sense. So that's how we kind of landed there.
And I think we already have some early market, I was telling Troy the story at lunch, some early market validation of this. So one of our European bank partners who works with us with Global Payments and Merchant called me yesterday and said at the right time, I really want to talk to TSYS about card issuer processing. As one of the largest banks in Europe. I was telling Troy this story, I said, well, that's a great answer and a great call to get. But they didn't say, I want to talk to Global Payments about Global Payments. They said, I want to talk to TSYS about their issuer processing business. So not only have we already seen, I think, some of the very positive direction that we wanted in what we can do in revenue together, but I think the market has really told us that TSYS really has the premier brand and offering in issuer processing globally.
And to my point earlier, just the corollary to that, we're totally convinced, because we've had it over the past few years and just didn't have the platform, if you will. Many of our, particularly international FIs, have talked to us, talked to Galen and Kelly over the years about merchant. Can you help us with merchant acquiring? Well, we don't really have that type setup outside the United States. So likewise, we're all convinced that that's going to be an opportunity as well to grow those partnerships, both issuing and acquiring internationally.
Okay. Check again and see if there's any questions in the room. Right over here.
Emily's got one.
Thanks, Don. Someone's got to get it started in the room.
Yeah.
Troy and Jeff, thank you guys for taking the time today. Thanks to your team. I'm Emily Edmonds. I run media relations and corporate communications here. During the announcement, we talked about $300 million of cost synergies over the next 3 years. Obviously, a component of that is people. As we're gearing up for a Q4 close, which is in 4 months, which is kind of crazy to think about, what does that look like from a people perspective from now through October? And Jeff, obviously you just talked a lot about how people are your most important asset. So there's going to be a lot of overlap and a lot of redundancies from where I sit from a corporate perspective, as well as from a merchant standpoint. So I'm curious your thoughts on, from a people standpoint, over the next 4 months, what does that look like in terms of change, and post-close, what does that look like?
Sure. Do you want
Thank
me
you.
to start, Troy?
Go ahead.
So I would say, certainly for the next 4 months, it's business as usual, just in terms of kind of what's going on daily. But if you back up further, I would say the nice thing about where we are, particularly here in Columbus, Georgia, is 2 of the 3 businesses that TSYS has are not businesses that Global Payments is in today, namely the issuer processing business and consumer solutions. So I would say in general, 65% of TSYS doesn't really overlap. Instead, those are markets that we're very enamored of and really want to be big in and take into further geographies. So I view that more as a revenue story on 2/3 of TSYS, really than a consolidation story than anything else. That's kind of one point. The second point I would say, if you go into the merchant business and other adjacent areas, which is the other 35% of TSYS, I would say there's a lot of opportunities in technology, in facilities, and all those other areas before you really get to people. So the way I really think about your question is, what can we do to consolidate technology environments? Because we have multiple separate instances of front ends, back ends, chargebacks, et cetera, and those are really systems rather than people. What do we do as a facilities matter? We each have facilities in Alpharetta, Georgia, in Atlanta, Georgia, in Midtown. I would tell you there's great opportunities overseas. So there's very good overlap geographically outside the United States in terms of physical presence and facilities between TSYS and Global Payments. Global Payments, for example, is looking at real estate right now in London. Guess what's going to happen when I move over to TSYS, right? Instead of getting a separate facility. So I think you have to look at that as well as asking on the people side. Now I'd say on the people side, one of the most important things in any of our businesses when we combine them, and one of the key metrics for success I always look at is, can we sustain and enhance the rate of revenue growth of the partnership so it's at the same or better rate after than before? To do that, you really don't want to disrupt or touch salespeople. Sales and sales support professionals in any business, as well as all the folks helping them, are critical to sustain the rate of revenue growth of what the businesses do. So I would say there are entire areas where you would say, let's make sure that we're leading with our best foot forward, and that we're retaining and enhancing as many of the folks who are driving the businesses in the first place. So I think if you step back, I think the simple answer to your question is, for 2/3 of the company, there really is no overlap, at one point. The second answer to your question is, in areas where there are overlap, there are technology areas of overlap, there are facilities areas of overlap, which generally are not people-based in terms of where the synergies are going to come from. So listen, time will tell. Whenever you're combining businesses that have 24,000 people across 100 virtual markets and 40 physical markets, clearly there are going to be conversations around overlap. But I don't think that's the driving factor in terms of what we want to do with the partnership.
I think the only thing I would add to that, if you look at the numbers in the last 12 months, the combined companies have hired over 1,000 people. And I think that's the kind of focus we ought to have, back to Jeff's point. 24,000 we ought to focus on. We're hiring a lot of people. I think we would be disingenuous to stand here, and we publicly said $300 million of cost synergies over 3 years that we're looking for, and Jeff done a great job of talking about this. A lot more than just people. You got 9 on your board now, or 8, 9?
8 including
8 now with John coming off, but
Yep.
we've got 9 on our board where we're going to have 12 combined. So there's a corporate expense that goes away. TSYS won't be listed, and Global won't be listed on the New York Stock Exchange. On and on and on around cost takeout. So we got to be very mindful of all of that. I've told our team, and Jeff said the same thing. They've been through mergers. We've been through mergers. Both of us so far have been on the side of acquiring others. It's not all, and this is very important, I think, to hear, it's not all on the back of TSYS. Jeff's made it very clear, we've all made it very clear, that we're going to take the best of the best. He mentioned London, the best of the city, the best of the infrastructure, the best of the locations, what makes sense. If we got 15 people in a location and they've got 200 people around the block, well, think about it. We're going that way and vice versa. So there will be changes. I think, again, I'll be disingenuous over the coming months, and we just got to embrace that change as I say all the time, make it our friend and not our enemy. And but there will be changes, and we're going to do all that we can. Trust me on this, to communicate, stay in front of it, and let you know what's going on.
Any other questions in the room? All right. You kind of touched on this a little bit just now, but Jeff, this is for you. How do you view the issuer segment of the payments market? And what synergies do you see that's between the two companies and the issuing line of business that could help issuing continue to progress and move forward?
Well, listen, the issuing business is critical to the success of the company. I mean, I think that's just, full stop right there. The second thing I'd say, and Troy actually alluded to this, is particularly outside the United States, we get asked all the time, just like Troy gets asked, where's your merchant business outside the United States? I can't tell you how many times I've been asked, well, do you guys do issuing too? I already gave you the example of a European bank who called the other day and said, we want to talk to TSYS, not to Global Payments, but to TSYS. So what I would tell you is outside the United States in particular, there is a very distinct need for issuing and acquiring to be resident in the same company. That's just the way the market, is developed. That's the way buyers buy those services. That's where I think a lot of the partnership and acquisition opportunities outside the United States and Europe and Latin America in particular really are. So I think it's critical that we be successful in growing the issuing business as fast as we can grow it. The amount of cross-referral that we can do from merchant to issuer and issuer to merchant, there really is no limit. I think the limit is how effectively can we prioritize those cross-referrals when we get into market. TSYS is stronger than Global Payments in Latin America. Global Payments outside mainland China has more of a presence in Asia than TSYS does. Those are opportunities. The same thing is true in Canada. The same thing is true across Europe. So issuer is absolutely critical to growing the combined business. And as Troy said a few minutes ago, it doesn't mean that we don't have competitors. It doesn't mean that we don't have businesses like Fidelity and Fiserv that are good at what they do. But it's important to understand that as a pure play payments company, every amount of capital, every dollar of capital we put into the combined business is toward the furtherance of success of the payments business. We all know how budgets work. When something needs to get cut and you're selling 50 different things, one is mortgages, one is loans, one is deposits, those are all very good businesses, but you can't fund all of them at the same time. Capital is not infinite. So it's important in that context to recognize that those dollars of capital coming out of TSYS and Global Payments on a combined basis are going into issuing and going into the businesses that produce the growth and got us to where we are today and going to take us to where we are going to be. And I would say, going back to what Troy said before about scale, and I don't know, Troy, we haven't really talked about this, so this actually is a little eye-opening when you look at it. So on a combined basis, TSYS and Global Payments at the time we close will be the fourth largest public company in Georgia, measured by market capitalization. Now, those other companies are great. I'm not going to poo-poo Coca-Cola or Home Depot. Those companies are real good, and UPS is number 3. And those are great businesses, and in many cases, great partners of each of us. But I would tell you, there's no reason we can't be number 3. We're in shouting distance of UPS. So when you think about where the combined company is today, what the trajectory of the business is, I fully expect us to break that top 3 in the next couple of years. And you know how we're going to get there? By firing on all cylinders, including especially in one of our largest businesses, issuing. So issuing is absolutely critical what we do. The other thing I'll say, you didn't ask this question, but it's a related point. So on net spend in our consumer TSYS's, can't say R yet, we got to get through the government stuff, but in TSYS's consumer solutions business. So I've already gotten multiple phone calls, including one when Cameron and I were in Mexico yesterday, which was a conversation about how fast can you bring consumer solutions to my country, meaning in this example, Spain or in Mexico, that is to say outside the United States. So we're getting unsolicited, and TSYS obviously has looked at this before, inquiries into expanding not just issuer, of course, but consumer solutions into other parts of the world. And I think that's a fantastic opportunity for the combined business. And that's how we're going to be number 3 by market cap shortly. I think number 1 or 2, you're going to have to wait for Home Depot or Coca-Cola to do something different than they currently do.
We don't want 300,000 people like
well,
Home
we do
Depot.
if we're worth like $250 billion, but I think at the end of the day, let's set our sights on Troy at number 3, and there's no reason we can't be there in the next few years.
Any other questions in the room?
I have one that came in on text that's kind of fun. Jeff and Troy, you have known each other for a significant amount of time. Can you describe each other in 3 words?
You go first.
Did you say 3 words? Okay. Trustworthy, smart, capable. That's Jeff Sloan.
You see, this is why I had him go first. I wanted to hear what it's like an open book test. Well, listen, I would say with Troy, gracious, honest, and family. I think those are the three things I think about Troy. We didn't rehearse that. That just kind of came up. I don't know who planted that question.
All right. Any other questions in the room? Just raise your hand. We'll get a mic to you. Okay. This one is for both of you, and I think we'll start with Jeff, but you mentioned diversity and inclusion a few minutes ago, and since D&I has been trending, and is a focus in many organizations now, how intentional will the decision-making be in making sure the demographics of the future senior and executive leadership will be reflective of the diversity of this global company?
Sure. Why don't I speak for the global payment side, and obviously Troy will speak for TSYS. So, listen, I think, mathematically, just to give a little bit of context for global payments. So, global payments is actually, in the United States, where we primarily measure it, it's a little bit harder to do overseas. We're actually fairly diverse today statistically. So I'd say relative to our financial services and technology peers, actually we're in a relatively good place. Now, unfortunately, I would say a lot of that is by accident, and I would say a lot of that is also not as good nearly as it can be. So as I mentioned before, we started a number of years ago an effort to make sure that it's not accidental, that we actually take it to where we think it needs to be, and really drive it to a point that makes us feel very proud about where we are. So one example to respond to what you asked is when we are looking outside the company in particular for new executives, we require that we interview a diverse slate of candidates. When we think as a company, I know TSYS and Troy feel exactly the same way, when we look at directors for our board as a company at Global Payments, and Troy and I have talked about this, we require that we actively recruit diverse and inclusive candidates. So we are not where we want to be. We have plenty of way to go and plenty of work to be done, but we're very proud of where we are. And I think we're doing the right things to get there, but it's going to require continual focus and investment in mentoring, and career counseling and training and all the things that we need to do. Very similar as to TSYS, we've actively rolled out unconscious bias training to all of our managers worldwide at Global Payments in the last number of months. These are all steps along the path, so it's a journey and it's ever changing, but I feel that we've made a lot of progress, and I know that we'll continue to do that going ahead, and that is something that I know, having spent a lot of time on with Troy, is very important to the culture of the combined company and very important to TSYS.
Yeah, maybe I can just add to that a little bit from a TSYS perspective. Again, maybe starting with our board as well, and I think all of you know this over the past really roughly a year and a half, 2 years, made a very concerted effort to become more diverse on our board. About 40% of our board is now classified as, diverse. A heck of a lot better than where it was literally 24 months ago. But like Jeff said, it's a journey. You never stop. On the management side, you've heard me stand up before and talk about it. I'm not proud of the fact that when we look at our, executive leadership team, that it's not more diverse than it is. And we too are making a very concerted effort. I don't mind sharing this with you. I never will forget. We were up in New York, 3 weeks ago. I've lost track of everything, Cameron, but and had a big meeting in New York, a 12-hour meeting to be exact. Remember that one? And me and Paul Todd and Cameron and Jeff went to dinner, and I didn't know where Jeff thought I was going, but I told Jeff, and we were in a private room. I said, Jeff, and I'm just going, how I am. I'm transparent. I said, Jeff, you and I have failed miserably. And Jeff kind of what a
it
way
was
to end
a
the
bad
day. What a way to end a 12-hour meeting. And I said, well, we've got to do a better job of diversity at our executive leadership teams. When I look around the room who TSIS brought up to this meeting and you brought up to this meeting, and, it's not as diverse as it needs to be. And he agrees 100%, And so it is a journey. It takes work. We're working at it. I do believe this, that he and I both, and I know the management team, I know TSIS is, and I'm also convinced from Jeff that your team is as well. We're committed to making it better.
Okay. Any questions in the room? Okay. There's one right there.
Tim McCullough from Merchant Technology. With the acquisitions you've made over the last few years, how integrated versus standalone is your technology stack?
Well, that might be a great question for Guido Sacchi, who's here. But I would say the general answer to your question is we segment our businesses into two types. The first is what we call our edge businesses, which generally tend to be, as Troy described, our own software-related businesses. And in those businesses, we generally keep them not integrated, to answer your question. So what does that mean, for example? So we're in a bunch of vertical markets. Restaurant is a really good example because that's a big vertical market in the industry and also for Heartland and Global Payments. And in that instance, we don't tell the folks at SICOM or Xenial, here's the restaurant software you should build. So from that point of view, it's not particularly integrated, but that's what we call an edge. So they're innovating at the edge. They're developing the products and services that they think Burger King and Tim Hortons and the like and Popeyes are really going to want. That's one example. But we also have elements within those businesses and across most of our portfolio that we call core. Those are things that we think we can apply a lot of scale to that we're very good at. So while we're not good at telling the Burger King folks, here's what you should do with the drive-through and here's what the physical point of sale software should look like, we are very good at compliance. We're very good at scale and payments processing, which is why a pure play payments company makes so much sense. As Troy alluded to before, we're very good at architecture. So while we allow our restaurant business, for example, to innovate and develop their software, we send in our systems and enterprise architects to say, is that the right architecture? Is it secure? Is it compliant? Is it scalable? Is it extensible? Can I bring it overseas? Those are things we think we are really good at because on a combined basis, TSIS and Global Payments have 6,000 people running around in technology. So if we're not good at technology, as a technology company, we got a lot of problems, right? So it's important for us therefore to have a good point of view on things that are good horizontally. So I would say the specific and vertical, no. We leave the innovation at the edge. The core functionality of what we do, we largely try to consolidate. And it's a balance in really everything that we do. Sure.
Anyone else? Okay. I have a final question here that was texted in, and Troy, this is for you. Will TSIS shares within employee stock purchase plan be converted to Global Payment shares? And then there's two more parts to it. What about shares of restricted stock awards, RSUs, and shares tied to performance grants? And then number 3, will they be converted as well?
Well, I can tell you what that person's thinking. The simple answer is yes. All of that will be addressed. All of that will be dealt with. They will be converted. We're working through the process now. We're making sure we nail down the mechanics, if you will, around the performance shares. Because obviously throwing these, two companies together will mix up that apple cart a little bit. But the simple answer is yes. Nobody's going to walk away. I had a question last week. It said, I just don't understand why, if I've got 1,000 shares of TSIS, when we put these two companies together, I'm only going to have 810 shares of TSIS. It doesn't work that way. But it'll all get converted correctly and converted over to global shares, correct, yep. Ryland, anything you want to add to that, or?
No, I think the big thing is all that rewards and everything. I think that maybe I'll start again. The big thing that I've heard on that same question is that all of the awards we have are being assumed. And so with it assumed, everything is going to your point, we still got to work out some mechanics and all, but everything that everyone has outstanding, whether it's in their ESPP account or, you know, equity awards that are time-based or whatever, they will be assumed. So same vesting periods, et cetera, is what we're going to see. So I think we're in a good place.
I will add this kind of a funny note. My brother called me about 3 or 4 days. He's retired from TSYS, and he was asking, because he didn't care about anything but the stock. And so I call AST, I believe, and I get the stock quote, and how's that going to work? I said, well, it hadn't worked all that out yet, but it'll be taken care of. And he asked me a second question, and I said, well, that's being addressed too. He said, you know, the CEO of TSYS, you don't know crap. I said, well, thank you very much.
All right. On that note, any other questions? Okay.
Any other? Well, look, thank you very much for coming in. I appreciate your
Oh,
time.
I think
Jeff?
we have one. Hold on.
Whoop.
Thank you. I'm sorry, one more question. I'm Elizabeth Swain. I'm from the issuing segment, and I think this is a great story to tell, and I think there's a lot of good opportunities, and it's going to be very easy for us to go back to our teams and tell this information. I think our teams are more concerned with the day-to-day impacts that they'll see. Do you have a timeline that we can share with our teams of kind of you're trying to get this done before the deal is completed, or will this continue over the next 6 months, year? Just kind of, you know, what is the thought around that?
Let me take a stab at that, and Ryland jump in. But I think the short answer is that we don't have a timeline at the moment. As you can imagine, there's about 6,000 things that have to be all addressed, from the mechanics of the performance shares all the way to, trust me, Global's not going to come in and say no more shorts around. I mean, Jeff wears blue jeans. I may wear blue jeans tomorrow to work. Right? I'll do it. And but I know we've had these conversations too, that they're on Workday like us, they're self-insured like us, different company administrators. I think United Health, we're Blue Cross. They've got pet insurance. We don't have pet insurance. But we're going to look at the best of both.
That's right.
I can't keep up with all the PDOs and all that stuff anymore, but all of that would be worked out. And I know that's important. I don't mean to demean that at all, but we don't have all those answers yet. Roland, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Not much to add, Troy, but I will tell you that through 19, everything's going to run as it does today.
Yeah.
I mean, through 19. And we're going to get into the planning stage, you know, once we get the transaction complete. And we'll have to look at 20 and see. But I will tell you, if you compare and sort of go down the list of what Global offers to all their team members, what we offer to all our team members, I mean, it's almost check right down the almost identical. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, just one point on the Global side, because you asked the way you did that. So we do have pet insurance. That didn't come from Legacy Global. That was actually when we did an acquisition, Active Network. They had pet insurance, and we thought it was a great idea. So I agree with Troy completely in terms of the best of both companies, but I would also say that we're very much open-minded. So there's things that we looked at, at Global, like flexible work weeks. There's already a lot of work at home. So I guess TSYS is similar to the way Global Payments is, but flexible work weeks, flexible hours, gifting of hours, that kind of stuff. We haven't yet figured that out, to Troy's point, at Global Payments, but we want to take the best of both companies. And as Ryland mentioned, once we get to the end of 19, certainly looking ahead and saying, for a company of this size, with this scale, what is the best thing to do for our people? What are our people asking for? What do they really want? That's a very good time to implement those things. And to be honest, that's how we decided to go with pet insurance. It came from one of the deals that we did, and it was important to them. We thought it was a great idea, and then we rolled it out to the rest of the employee base, and I would hope that we would do the same thing here.
Well, again, thanks to everybody for coming in and asking the questions. Jeff, thank you, your management team, for making the effort to be here. We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Troy.
Thank you, man.
Thanks,
Good job.